Some voices are never heard, until the fight for justice makes them impossible to ignore. Today, we honor a story that demands to be told. There's something about Madison Pierce's laughter that still lingers in the minds of those who loved her, a kind of delicate, effortless sound that could brighten the darkest rooms. It wasn't the loudest laugh, but it had a warmth that drew people in, as if she carried a quiet hope beneath her fragile smile. At 26, Madison was the kind of person who felt deeply, sometimes too much. She wasn't just anyone. She was a sister, a daughter, a friend with dreams folded carefully inside her like pages of an unfinished book. Her life, however, unraveled in a way no one could have imagined, and what followed was a web of heartbreak, confusion, and chilling secrets that would leave her family questioning everything they thought they knew. Madison's apartment was on the third floor of a weathered brick building on a quiet street in a sleepy town, the kind where everybody thinks they know their neighbors, where windows are often left cracked open for fresh air, and the scent of blooming jasmine fills the night. She lived there alone, in a modest space peppered with little signs of her personality. A collection of battered novels stacked beside the window, sketches taped to the walls, soft portraits of places she longed to visit, her grandmother's old silver bracelet resting on the dresser, worn thin from years of use. She worked at a local bookstore, her favorite place to hide away from the noise of the world, the scent of old paper a comfort in her otherwise chaotic mind. Her family described Madison as someone who wrestled with silence inside herself. She had a difficult relationship with her mother, a distance marked by years of unspoken disappointment and quiet arguments. Her younger brother, Caleb, was her protector, always the first to notice when she retreated too far into herself. Madison's closest friend, Jenna, often worried about the exhaustion she saw beneath Madison's bright exterior. There were hints of something darker beneath the surface, a weight Madison carried alone, a delicate balance between hope and despair. The night everything changed began unremarkably, with Madison finishing her shift at the bookstore just before closing. Jenna was supposed to meet her for coffee, but Madison canceled last minute, saying she needed to be alone. That was the last anyone heard from her that evening. The following morning, Madison's body was found in her apartment, sprawled across the hardwood floor. No signs of forced entry, no clear motive. The only clue was a small, strange object clutched in her hand, a broken keychain with a peculiar emblem, something no one in her circle recognized. The police were quick to rule out a burglary or a random act of violence. Her death was officially declared an accident, a tragic overdose. But those closest to her refused to believe it was that simple. Caleb insisted there was more beneath the surface, and Jenna spoke of the phone calls Madison had been avoiding for weeks before her death, calls that left her visibly shaken. As the investigation unfolded, the picture of Madison's life grew more complicated. She had recently been seeing someone, an enigmatic figure named Eli, someone her family barely knew, who had appeared suddenly and vanished just as quickly after her death. No one knew where he lived or what he did, and his phone went unanswered. A stranger who seemed to hold the key to the mystery, yet disappeared into thin air. But the strangest detail emerged when the broken keychain was examined by a private investigator hired by Caleb. It wasn't just a random trinket. The emblem belonged to a defunct local club, known not for crime or notoriety, but for its bizarre and secretive rituals. Members would meet in abandoned warehouses, engaging in strange performances meant to liberate the mind. Rumors swirled about the club's obsession with unlocking hidden fears and desires. None of this was public knowledge, yet here was the evidence, buried in Madison's hand. Why did she have this keychain? Had she been involved, even briefly, in this obscure group? If so, what had happened during those meetings? And how did it connect to her death? Meanwhile, family dynamics grew tense. Madison's mother became increasingly distant, refusing to discuss anything about Madison's last days, brushing off Caleb's questions with cold silence. Caleb's frustration grew. Was there a secret his mother was hiding? A side of Madison's life the family had never seen? Jenna, desperate to find answers, uncovered a series of cryptic messages on Madison's phone. Fragments of conversations about betrayal, a crossing of lines, and a warning to stay away. Whoever Madison was speaking to seemed dangerous, but there was no name, no number, just a shadow hanging in her last texts. It was as if Madison had stepped unknowingly into a storm of her own making, a clash of jealousy, fear, and desperation. The night before her death, a neighbor reported hearing a strange noise, soft murmurs, a heated argument muffled behind Madison's apartment walls. The tone was personal, filled with anger and sorrow, not random shouting or violence. It was the voice of someone who loved and hurt at the same time. The neighbor couldn't make out the words, but remembered a chilling silence that followed. Could it have been Eli? Or someone else? The investigation revealed Eli had recently been seen arguing with a woman matching Madison's description in a park nearby, their faces flushed with rage and tears. Witnesses claimed Eli had threatened to expose secrets that would destroy everything. The deeper Caleb and Jenna dug, the more unsettling details emerged. Madison had confided in Jenna about a secret fear, a man from her past who had returned unexpectedly, stirring memories she'd tried to bury. This man, however, was never officially identified, and his motives remained unknown. One night, Caleb received an anonymous message, a photo of Madison, smiling but with eyes full of fear, holding a handwritten note that read simply, "Not everything is as it seems." There was no signature, no explanation. The investigation stalled for months. Without solid leads, the police grew cold, labeling the case unsolvable. But Caleb refused to let Madison's story end that way. Then the unimaginable happened. A package arrived at Caleb's doorstep. Inside was a small, weathered journal belonging to Madison. Its pages were filled with delicate handwriting, personal thoughts, fears, and revelations, more raw and honest than anyone had seen before. She wrote about feeling watched, about a deep paranoia creeping in, about a relationship built on secrets and lies. There was one entry, scribbled hastily. "If something happens to me, look for the key they all ignore. The truth is hidden where light doesn't reach." Caleb and Jenna pored over the journal, piecing together a puzzle no one else seemed to see. The key wasn't just the broken keychain. It was something far more sinister, a hidden truth buried beneath layers of personal pain and betrayal. What they uncovered next shook their world. Madison's involvement with a circle of people bound by a shared secret, a small, tight-knit group with connections stretching back years, linked by jealousy, blackmail, and fractured trust. Not a criminal syndicate, but a gathering where human flaws, envy, desperation, and fear, twisted lives in unexpected ways. The final revelation was stranger than fiction. Madison's death wasn't caused by a stranger or a violent act, but by a miscalculated attempt at self-preservation. In her last desperate moments, caught between those who loved her and those who sought to control her, she made a choice, one that had tragic consequences no one anticipated. A few days later, Caleb receives a cryptic voicemail from an unknown number. A voice, distorted but familiar, whispers, "You're closer than you think. But the real truth, it's not what you want to find. Watch your back. They're still watching." The line goes dead. After that unnerving voicemail, Caleb sat frozen in his cramped apartment, the small device slipping from his trembling hand. His heart pounded like a frantic drumbeat echoing in the empty room. Who was that voice? How could they know he was digging deeper? And most hauntingly, what exactly were they still watching? Madison's death had already shattered his world, but now the walls around him felt like they were closing in. Every shadow in the room seemed to stretch longer, every creak of the floorboards a reminder that he wasn't alone. He couldn't trust anyone, not the police, not his mother, and certainly not Eli or the unknown figures lurking in the background. Caleb's mind flashed back to the days before Madison's death, those subtle, unspoken tensions that nobody dared confront. His sister had always been a mystery, a quiet storm. Not because she was distant by choice, but because she was weighed down by invisible chains made of secrets and fears she couldn't share. Jenna had told him about the moments when Madison's eyes clouded over, as if seeing something no one else could. There was a fragile beauty in those moments, a silent cry for help buried beneath layers of strength. She described the nights when Madison paced her apartment, whispering to herself, struggling to make sense of the tangled mess inside her head. It wasn't depression alone. It was something darker, a labyrinth of people, lies, and threats that closed in tighter with every passing day. The journal Caleb had found was more than a collection of thoughts. It was a map, fragmented, cryptic, but undeniably revealing. It showed a woman trying to fight back against forces she barely understood. The entries were raw, honest, filled with self-doubt and flashes of clarity. One entry stood out, written just days before Madison died. "They think they own me, but I won't be their pawn anymore. If this secret ever breaks, it'll tear us all apart. I'm scared, but I'm done hiding. I need to find a way out." Who were they? Who did Madison fear so much that she felt the need to protect them, even in death? The answer was tangled in her past, relationships, betrayals, and a history Caleb was only beginning to uncover. Eli was the ghost that haunted every conversation about Madison's last days. No one knew where he came from, what he really wanted, or why he disappeared when Madison needed him most. Caleb remembered the stories Jenna told him, how Eli appeared suddenly in Madison's life, like a wildfire sparking hope and danger all at once. He was charming but elusive, someone who seemed to wear masks for every situation. Madison had confided that Eli's past was as troubled as her own, yet there was something magnetic about him, a dangerous allure. Caleb's own investigation uncovered a few disturbing details. Eli had a history of intense, volatile relationships that ended abruptly and often violently. He was known to have a temper, but also a strange ability to vanish without a trace. Some whispered rumors of addiction, others spoke of debts owed to people Caleb dared not name. The last time anyone saw Eli was during that argument in the park, the one witnesses described as filled with rage and tears. But where had he gone since? No social media, no trace on phone records. It was as if he had evaporated. The broken keychain Madison clutched the night she died was the thread leading to the secret club, an obscure gathering few knew about but many whispered rumors of. Initially dismissed as a strange fringe group, Caleb and Jenna discovered its roots ran deeper. The club wasn't a criminal syndicate, but it operated like a secret society bound by unusual rituals and unwritten rules. Its members were artists, misfits, and people desperate for escape, a place where emotions were raw, boundaries blurred, and truth was distorted. But what made the club truly sinister were the personal dramas that unfolded inside. Caleb's private investigator uncovered that jealousy, betrayal, and manipulation were commonplace there. The club was a breeding ground for dangerous liaisons and fragile alliances. One shocking revelation came when Jenna connected with a former member who had left after a terrifying experience. She told Jenna about the trial, a ritual where members were forced to confront their darkest fears in front of the group, often leading to breakdowns or disappearances. The club kept everything secret, but Caleb wondered if Madison had been pulled into this world against her will. Had the club contributed to her death? Had she tried to escape and paid the ultimate price? While Caleb and Jenna hunted for answers, Madison's mother withdrew further into herself, becoming an enigma wrapped in grief and silence. When Caleb confronted her, she would only say, "Some things are better left buried, for your own good." Those words cut deeper than any argument. Caleb felt like there was a wall between them, one built from pain and fear. Was she protecting Madison's memory? Or was she hiding something darker? Jenna speculated that Madison's mother knew more than she let on. Maybe she was part of the secret circle. Maybe she had suffered her own betrayals and was terrified of the truth coming out. The family's fractures were like invisible scars, each person hiding wounds too raw to expose. And in the middle of it all was Madison, caught in a web woven by love, guilt, and silence. The mysterious man from Madison's past was another piece of the puzzle nobody wanted to face. Jenna remembered Madison's voice trembling when she mentioned him, how his return had disturbed her fragile peace. Caleb traced this man to a small town nearby, someone with a criminal record, but no clear motive. What terrified Madison was the history they shared, a relationship filled with promises broken and trust shattered. Could this man have been stalking her, threatening her, or was he part of the secret society's tangled connections? Despite Caleb's efforts, the man had disappeared before he could be questioned, leaving only a trail of dead ends. The neighbor's account of the argument in Madison's apartment was chilling. Soft voices, then heated words, then silence. Caleb and Jenna used this to reconstruct the final hours. Cell phone records showed Madison had received multiple calls from an unlisted number, calls she ignored or answered with caution. Surveillance footage from nearby streets revealed a figure lurking outside her building, appearing and disappearing without explanation. Caleb's heart sank as the pieces fell into place. Madison hadn't died alone. Someone was with her, someone whose presence might hold the key to her death. But who? Eli? The man from her past? Or someone else, hidden in plain sight? The more Caleb and Jenna uncovered, the more the story grew complicated. What started as a personal tragedy morphed into a labyrinth of secrets where every revelation seemed to birth more questions. Madison's death was not the end of the story, it was a beginning. A door cracked open to a world where love could become control, where trust turned into betrayal, and where survival meant risking everything. Caleb's resolve hardened. He vowed not to rest until Madison's story was told. Not the version the police gave, not the whispers of accidental death, but the truth in all its brutal, heartbreaking detail. One rainy afternoon, Jenna found something unexpected, an old, forgotten voicemail on Madison's phone, hidden beneath layers of deleted messages. The voice was faint, trembling, and desperate. It was Madison. "If you're listening to this, it means they got too close. I don't know who to trust anymore. There's a way out, but it's not safe. Please be careful. It's not just my life at stake, it's everyone's." The message cut off abruptly. Caleb played the recording over and over, the fear and urgency in Madison's voice like a punch to the gut. She was scared, not just for herself, but for others. What secret was so dangerous it silenced her forever? Then, late one night, Caleb's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me where the shadows fall. I have answers, but be ready to face what you've been hiding." Attached was a photo of Madison's apartment building, shot from a dark alley. Caleb's hands shook as he stared at the screen. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the chance to uncover the truth. But it was also the most dangerous step yet. As Caleb prepared to leave, Jenna grabbed his arm. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "You don't know what's waiting out there." Caleb nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The night was thick with fog as he stepped out into the cold, the city streets swallowing him whole. Every shadow felt alive, every footstep echoed with unseen eyes. And then, just as he reached the alley where the message had said to meet, his phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. Caleb answered. A voice, low and distorted, hissed. "You shouldn't have come. Now you're part of it too." Before Caleb could respond, the line went dead. Caleb's breath hitched as the line went dead, leaving him alone in the thick fog, the night pressing in from all sides like a silent threat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet stayed rooted. This was no longer about just uncovering Madison's story. It was about survival, his and everyone else's. He glanced at his phone again, the screen cold and lifeless. Whoever had called was watching, waiting. Caleb took a steadying breath and pushed forward into the shadows, following the vague outline of the alley. At the end, a figure emerged, blurred by distance but unmistakably familiar. The person stepped into the dim light, a woman with eyes sharp and tired. It was Lila. Caleb's heart skipped. Lila, Madison's closest confidant before Jenna, had vanished without explanation shortly after Madison's death. Now, here she was, appearing like a ghost from the past, holding answers Caleb had chased for months. "You shouldn't have come here," Lila whispered, voice trembling but determined. "They're still watching." Caleb swallowed the fear. "Who? Who are you talking about?" Lila's eyes darted nervously before she spoke. "The club. The people Madison tried to escape. They're dangerous, Caleb. I tried to leave once, but they don't let go easily." Her words confirmed Caleb's darkest suspicions. This wasn't just a tragic death. It was a tangled web of control, secrets, and threats, one that had swallowed Madison whole. "I know what happened to Madison," Lila said, voice cracking with emotion. "And I'm going to help you make sure they pay for what they did." Over the next few weeks, Lila became Caleb's guide into the shadowed world Madison had fought to break free from. She shared stories of manipulation and coercion within the club, where members were bound not just by rituals, but by fear and blackmail. Madison's involvement was reluctant at best. She had been pulled in by Eli, who promised escape, but instead led her deeper into the club's darkness. The trial was more than a ritual. It was a trap designed to expose vulnerabilities, to control. One night, Madison tried to leave for good, threatening to expose the club's secrets. That's when the situation spiraled. A confrontation erupted between Madison and several club members, including Eli, in her apartment. Words turned to threats. In desperation, Madison tried to protect herself, but a struggle ensued. Lila's voice faltered as she revealed the truth Caleb had feared. Madison's death was not an overdose or accident, but the tragic result of that struggle. She was fatally injured, her body's final defense against those who sought to silence her forever. Armed with Lila's testimony and evidence gathered from secret recordings Lila had hidden away, Caleb contacted Detective Harper, a dogged investigator who had refused to close Madison's case despite pressure. Together, they compiled an airtight case. The police arrested Eli along with 3 other high-ranking club members, men and women who had wielded power through fear and intimidation. The arrest shook the town. What had seemed like a quiet tragedy now exploded into a scandal exposing years of psychological torment inflicted on vulnerable people under the guise of liberation. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. Madison's family, friends, and the community gathered, their faces etched with pain and anticipation. Caleb sat beside Jenna and Lila, clutching the journal Madison had left behind, a symbol of her fight for truth. The prosecution painted a chilling picture, a secret society thriving on control, where Madison's spirit had been crushed by cruelty and betrayal. Witnesses testified about the club's rituals, the blackmail, and the threats. Lila's testimony was the most powerful. Her voice broke as she recounted the last night, the fear in Madison's eyes, and the desperate fight for survival. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words sinking into every heart. Eli's defense tried to discredit the witnesses, portraying Madison as unstable, implying her death was self-inflicted. But the evidence was overwhelming. Texts, recordings, and the journal all pointed to a brutal reality. After days of tense deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts, including manslaughter and coercion. Sentencing was swift but heavy. Eli received a 25-year sentence, with the others handed terms ranging from 10 to 20 years. Justice, while delayed, had finally been served. The trial's end did not erase the pain, but it lifted a weight that had suffocated Madison's family. Caleb felt a bittersweet victory, a mix of relief and grief. At a quiet memorial held shortly after sentencing, Caleb spoke. Madison was not just a victim of tragic circumstances. She was a fighter, a sister, a friend who deserved so much more than what this cruel world gave her. Today, we honor her memory by telling the truth, by refusing to let her story be forgotten or twisted. Her voice echoes through us, demanding justice, demanding change. Months later, life slowly returned to a fragile calm. Caleb and Jenna began working with local organizations to support victims of psychological abuse and secret societies, hoping to prevent others from suffering as Madison did. Lila, freed from fear, found a new path, dedicating herself to healing and advocacy. The scars remained, but in sharing Madison's story, they found strength and purpose. On a rainy evening, Caleb sat by Madison's favorite window, holding her worn silver bracelet. The world outside was blurred by the rain, but inside, memories shone bright. He whispered, "We did it, Madison. We told your story. You're free now." A soft breeze stirred the curtains as if in answer. Madison's fight was over, but her legacy had just begun. Justice for Madison Pierce ended not in silence, but with a promise that no secret would remain buried, no voice silenced. Her story remains a haunting reminder of the human spirit's resilience and the price of truth. If this story moved you, help keep their memory alive. Subscribe for more stories where truth refuses to stay buried, and justice always finds a way. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thanks for watching.